So yeah, thinking about financial justice and especially on executive pay. Yeah, well, originally I was thinking inflation, but realizing actually what I wanted to talk about was more executive pay. So, um, looking back over the past 40 years, roughly, and it's kind of difficult to get these stats and to compare like for like, but I've tried to do that as best I can. Okay. So trying to look at what was the average cost of stuff in 1980 and see how that has changed 40 years on. Hence, I was thinking about inflation originally. You know, and I guess inflation normally measures, that stuff, milk, bread, basic food, clothes, including baby clothes, utilities, so water, gas, electricity prices, and then looking at average salaries across different UK professions. What I haven't correlated actually on this as well is the fact that I guess we spend a lot lower of a percentage of our average wage on food now compared to what people did 40 years ago, or and certainly even, further back before 1980, and how that affects figures. Yeah, I'm not sure. But anyway, this is the stuff that I started to look at. Roughly, purchasing power of £100 in 1980 is worth around about £500 in 2020. Roughly, all things being equal, which we know they're not equal. But if you want a rough rule of thumb, there's roughly a five-fold increase in the price of basic goods. So in theory, a Mars bar in 1980 is now five times what it was, or in 2020 it would be, a haircut, a pair of jeans, a loaf of bread, a pint of milk. That rough kind of thing shows the level of inflation when you look at it over that 40-year period. So I suppose an inflation rate would be 500%, but I'm not sure that a percentage is the most helpful way of looking at it. Sometimes I've called it a times five increase. Mm. And then a big discrepancy in that obviously becomes house prices, because house prices have risen far more than that. So if purchasing power is about times five, actually a house price is over times 11 the price. So in 1980, the average UK house price was £19,000. That's just mind-blowing to think, in 2020, wow, average UK house price, so across the whole of the UK, we know that the London market is massively overpriced compared to the rest of the country, but is roughly 240,000. So that's about 11 times the increase. So we can see that houses have got a lot more expensive, which is why it's harder for people to get onto the property ladder relative to salaries or the rest of cost of living. You could argue, I'm not sure on this, we'd need to look at it more, is part of the problem in London the fact that money laundering has led to people investing in properties in central London, because what do you do if you've got a huge amount of cash that you've made from ill-gotten criminal enterprises? One of the safest things that you can do is buy a house with it. Go on, Sam, you want to say something?
Sorry to butt in. These are London houses or national average?
No, that's national average.
So all the stats are national. Thank you.
Yeah. They're all national average. Yeah. I think you're going to tell us something about the London property market from your experience and whether it is indeed a haven for money laundering, as we read in some Guardian articles.
I think it is not me guessing. I think we all know that there's a lot of it going on, and London is a very favoured tax haven. As we can, if you just look back at the Panama Papers, there's other papers, and also what happened over the last few years with Russia, exactly how much and how much angst and hand-wringing there was when it became apparent that oligarchs, kings of Jordan, they all own so much property in London.
Yeah. And how we have rolled out the red carpet and made it easy and welcomed people to be able to do that and bring that investment because we've wanted the cash. Definitely, we've done that. And how much has that distorted the London house price market or the rest of the UK one? I'm not sure. It could be an issue. We can discuss that more later on. But anyway, so house prices have gone up a lot faster than the rest of cost of living over the past 40 years. Average pay roughly gone up by the same as the cost of living and that purchasing power. So in 1980, and again, it's difficult to get stats on this, but looking around different measures, roughly the average salary was 6,474. Later on, I think I've quoted that as 6,500 from other studies, but that kind of figure was the average salary across the UK in 1980. In 2020, the average salary is roughly about 31,000. So that would be a 4.8 times 4.8 increase, or what was that, 480% increase. So roughly keeping pace with the 5 times average, the 4.8 increase. But that obviously masks different industries that we can look at as well. So the starting wage for a police constable, this is, in 1980 was just under £5,000, 4,900. In 2020, the starting salary for a UK police constable is, I believe, 26,000, or was. I mean, it's higher than that now, 3 years later. So that is times 5.3 increase. So again, roughly in line with the times 5 cost of living increase. A teacher starting salary in 1980 was around 6,276, and in 2020, 26,000. So you could argue that if teachers had a raw deal, that, you know, their pay has not quite kept pace. I think, and this plays into my argument maybe later on in terms of executive pay, I think the higher grades have increased more, but this is an average starting salary for teachers. So again, I don't know the stats, but I would, I'm not a betting man, I would very highly believe, is that how I would say it, that a head teacher's pay has gone up by more than 5 times over that 1980 to 2020 bracket, whereas a starting salary for teachers has not quite kept pace with that. It's times 4.1. Some industries, obviously, massively different, you know. So top flight footballers' pay is hugely changed. In 1980, the average pay, apparently, for someone in what was then the old First Division in 1980 was £20,000. So still significantly higher than the national average of 6,500, but not, you know, extortionately high. Whereas in 2020, the average salary, apparently, for a Premier League player was £3 million a year. And obviously the top players will be getting way more than that. So that is an increase of times 150, or is that therefore 15,000% compared to 500%? So you see, there are some industries that clearly have massively inflated their pay. Now, maybe as a football fan, do I slightly defend this industry? Because I think that that is an industry where we are genuinely rewarding talent to a degree. I mean, yes, there's a lot more money that's come into football, especially since the advent of the Premier League, and people are happy to pay a subscription rate on Sky or on BT Sport or whatever. And so there's a lot more money in the game and players have a lot more power. But in theory, in football, we are rewarding quality. You know, the Wayne Rooneys or the Mo Salahs are that rare that we are prepared to pay huge amounts of money because of the quality of their talent, because of the scarcity of their talent. MPs, interestingly, have not shot up. I thought this would be a bigger increase because it's only a times 6.75 increase, so a bit bigger than the times 5 national average. In 1980, an MP was paid £12,000. In 2020, an MP is paid £81,000. Now, if you're a cabinet member, you get more. If you're the prime minister, you get more. But I think the prime minister still is only, I mean, I say on, what is it, about £142,000 or £146,000, which is why you get these ridiculous arguments over MP pay. And you'll get certain groups who are saying MPs are not paid anywhere near what they should be. And other people who are saying, hang on, MPs are paid way more than they should be. Because they are paid far more than the national wage. If the national average was, you know, 31,000 in 2020, they're being paid, what, more than twice the national average. But the problem is MPs don't compare themselves to the average population. They would compare themselves to their friends in senior business positions or maybe in other lucrative industries. And they would feel like, but hang on, if I was in the private sector, I could get paid 10 times the amount that I am being paid as an MP. And that's why, yeah, I don't know what the solution is to this, to be honest, because I think MPs get a massively good salary. As someone who works in the charity sector, I'm not anywhere near that. I'm like 81 grand. How can anyone complain and say that they're not being paid enough? But because they hang around with all of their friends in business and they move in and out of business and the whole revolving door and lobbying, etc., they're comparing themselves to their mates that they went to Eton or to university with and thinking, but if I was in another profession, I could be getting paid 10 times the amount. And so I've put on there the comparison of the average CEO for a council. So like, in Rushmore Borough Council or previously in Merton Council or whatever. I was shocked when I first realized how much the chief exec of Merton Council received when I was, living in Merton 10 years ago and involved in some of the local political stuff there, to realize how well they are paid. I couldn't figure out what it was in 1980 and to give the exact comparison. But in 2020, the average council chief executive is paid 220,000. Some are paid way more than that. Some are paid in 500,000 or 600,000. And you think, oh my goodness. I mean, so these guys are getting paid 4 times the rate sometimes as the prime minister. Surely the prime minister's got more responsibility, as someone involved in, because how can you compare politics to business? But this is comparing politics to politics in a sense. Okay, a chief executive of a council is not supposed to be party political, but they're still running local government services. The prime minister is running national government services. And yet, I think this is where we start to see the disparity and the inflation in executive pay, where chief executives are being expected to be paid way more than they were 40 years ago. Sorry, Sam, did you want to come in?
Go. Sorry, yeah, you've got me in a fog here because I'm partly irritated, annoyed, and partly angry. There are 2 parts. This is excellent, by the way, just to see these stark comparisons pretty much throughout my own career. I can resonate with some of the meager, £6,000 numbers when it started out. But let's leave aside the nurses and the doctors. You talk about talents and the footballers. That we can come back to. But this one particularly irks me because it is politics for politics. A council CEO is running an organization. My brother used to head up the LDA, and it's a £300 million organization. But let's discuss the MPs are running the country. And I think a lot of the problems that come is because they are underpaid. If you pay peanuts, ... they should be paid more. The tension is, if you pay too much, you get the wrong people wanting to go work to earn the salary.
Yeah.
But I think they probably deserve more than they're currently getting, and to be held to greater accountability, which is the next part of it. I know, Jamie, sorry, I don't want to... I'll shut up, you carry on and finish.
Well, let me be controversial. Should MPs be paid more or should other people be paid less? Because an MP on a salary of 81,000, I think is incredibly generous compared to nurses, teachers, lorry drivers, all of those other, but when they compare themselves to certain other positions. So this, I think, is part of the challenge. Let me give you the last couple of slides and then we can do proper discussion. Okay. So I was trying to work out CEO pay for different industries and comparing 1980 to 2020 and looking at the median FTSE 250 CEO salary. So the FTSE 250, we probably all know, is the UK stock exchange, isn't it? The LSE would be the London Stock Exchange listings of the public companies in the UK. And the FTSE 250 is the largest 250 companies on that. so in theory, our biggest 250 companies in the country. The average salary for the CEO of a FTSE 250 company is £1.72 million, which is 55 times the salary of the UK median full-time worker of 31,000. Whereas in 1980, the median CEO salary for the FTSE 250 was at 117,000 and 18 times the average UK salary. So I think this is where the problem starts, that I think executive pay has far outstripped average worker pay. We're paying our chief executives way more compared to they were being paid 40 years ago. And that creates the whole financialization or the desire for every other salary to increase as well at comparative executive levels, like chief execs of councils. Last other slide on this, and then we'll chat. So that's FTSE 250. It obviously gets greater, the disparity, when you talk about FTSE 100. So the 100 largest companies on the stock exchange, the average CEO salary for a FTSE 100 company in 2021, so roughly 2020, I mean a year out, was 3.4 million, which is 109 times the average UK worker salary at the time of 31,000. And I've left the previous comparison to 1980. So we're paying our chief executives way more than they were being paid 40 years ago by comparison. So the FTSE 250 CEOs have had an increase times 14.7. When you think, remember, the cost of living has grown by times 5, and most pay has roughly kept with that. But chief exec pay has increased times 14, or for the FTSE 100, about times 30, which becomes, what is that, a 3,000% increase rather than a 500% increase. So I think it's that people at the chief exec, or what we call the C-suite level, the senior directors of companies, have chosen to reward themselves so much more. And then that starts to filter through to other top level, but obviously it doesn't come down to the bottom. It's, the directors and then the senior management have massively inflated their pay grades. And then that leads to a situation, I think, of just greater inequality, where other people if you can call it a comparable industry, so running a council, have said, well, hang on, I'm a chief exec for this large corporation, in effect. So in order to get the talent, as Sam is saying, we need to pay comparable rates. And so we've started to pay council chief execs crazy amounts of money, really, by comparison to the average UK wage, but not crazy amounts of money by comparison to what people could earn in the private sector. But because the private sector has way outstripped, it's created this massive disparity. We know that wealth inequality is not great for a company's well-being and just happiness index on all of these things. I'm sure Emily can share more on this in a moment, being a good Scandinavian, and these guys do this better than the rest of us. But a couple of slides on this. So this is comparing the top 10% with the bottom 50% in terms of just affluence across the UK. And you can see the gap was starting to narrow up until around about the 1980s, when it widens again. So people in the top 10% wealthy people in the UK are starting to widen that gap away again from that. And it's the bottom 50%. I mean, that's half the population, isn't it? The average, in effect. And similar on income distribution. So before it was just on general wealth, and this is actually on pay. You can see that it was starting to narrow up until about 1980, and then it's widened. And I guess my theory on this is, have chief executives and senior directors of companies become, well, far too greedy, and we've allowed that as a society in accepting massive wage increases for people at the very top. And then, people say, oh, well, in comparison, because, if BP is paying this for their people, then Shell has to pay this for it. And every company starts having to do it, and you get that spiral effect. Have we allowed that too much? And that has created greater disparity in society, which isn't great for society. And I think it's created, or is creating, a two-tier system in the UK, where you've got the average worker on whatever salary they are on, the policeman, the nurse, the teacher, that kind of thing, the charity worker. Can I put myself in that class? And then you have a smaller group who are trying to become the new, I mean, they're not quite the super rich, ultra high net worth individuals, but they're trying to grow, or we are growing as a society, this class of senior directors, people that are getting paid in the hundreds of thousands or several hundreds of thousands or into the millions, and that is growing. And I don't think that's good for society. I guess it's probably not very good for the economy as well, and many would argue certainly it's not very financially just. But therefore, I'm sorry, this is the end of it. What is the solution to that? Shareholders are starting to raise more questions now, when salary increases are being voted on, because if it's a publicly traded company, then it's the shareholders that have to agree a lot of this stuff, at the AGMs. And there is more scrutiny now on C-suite pay, but it's really difficult to reduce it once it's increased, isn't it? Is it going to level off? But once the genie is out of the bottle, how do you encourage people to have a lower wage relative to other professions? One thing that other groups have started to campaign on is to bring in a ratio within businesses where the CEO and senior director should only be paid a certain percentage greater than the entry level. So would that be, some say the CEO should never be paid above 20 times more the rate of the person at the entry level. I mean, 20 times, if someone on the entry level is still getting paid, hopefully, a living wage, 20 times that is surely still a massive salary that anyone could be able to live off very comfortably. And when we went back, was it the previous ones were 18 times, here in terms of the median. So we'd be roughly within that, rather than getting to the times 55 or the times 109. Because I guess my theory on that is this leading to greater inequality, which is not good for society? It's leading to financial injustice. It's leading to a two-tier society, which is really unhelpful. And the people at the top who would say, oh, but we deserve this pay, our talent is rare, I would say it's not rare. You're not Wayne Rooney. If you're the CEO of Barclays or HSBC, there are plenty of other people that can come in and do those jobs. I think the talent is far rarer than at the top of football or something like that, or even in music or maybe other creative industries, where you could make a better justification for the uniqueness. So I don't think there's an argument in terms of talent. It's just because we've allowed these people to massively outstrip the rest of the country in terms of pay increases, and we've potentially got ourselves into a mess. But therefore, how you get out of that mess, well, discuss your thoughts. Let me stop